And I'll be recording now.
Okay, so I guess it looks like we are good to go. Thank you, Erica, for getting us started. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. It's good to be back with you guys. I know I've missed the last couple of meetings, so certainly thank you to Erica and Ron and Patrick, and certainly to our chair, Dr. Coleman, and to all of you for the good work you've been doing. I know the subcommittee work has gotten started, and we certainly thank you for that as well. And we'll touch on at the end of the meeting tonight, we'll touch on some scheduling as we move forward. A few things that we want to go over, and also talk about a second public session, public listening session. So we'll talk about that at the end of the meeting tonight. But for now, we'll go ahead and get started. Just to welcome those who are watching us online. We thank you all for joining us tonight. We know we have a competing event for sure going on with our House delegation bill hearing. So we thank those of you who've joined us here tonight. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is, I guess, Dr. Coleman, I'll kick it to you. I know that I believe actually our guest presenter tonight and the PowerPoint is actually going to come from Erica. But I'll kick it over to you, Dr. Coleman, to get us started. One thing, let me just say real quick, I apologize. There are two members who we know are not going to be able to be with us tonight, David Harrington and
Christian Rhodes.
Yeah, and Christian Rhodes. Thank you, Erica. But I believe we have everybody else. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you, John. Ms. Wilson doesn't need much of an introduction, but as you mentioned, she's going to cover or give us some insights around compensation and possibly some ways that compensation is handled in our current district, and maybe some insights into see what's happening around the country, at least in one or two other spaces and places. Afterwards, to your point, John, we will talk about a second forum. There'll be some discussion around that, and we will come together as a task force committee to see to what extent we do that. We have some dates in mind, and we should talk about an extension to our work as well. And without further ado, Erica Berry Wilson.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. Again, good evening, task force members. I appreciate your time this evening to talk about compensation, more importantly, compensation and professional development opportunities in the kind of the lay of the land that we see here in the county, but also some of the other things we're seeing in some other school districts. And I also want to take the time first to thank Ms. Makata Jacobs. Ms. Jacobs has been quite a resource for me throughout this process, and I do appreciate her help and her efforts and assistance and everything. And hopefully, if I get anything wrong, particularly as it comes to the current board, she'll just step in and correct me, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. But again, so we'll get started. I'm going to share PowerPoint, which I will make sure it gets distributed along with some other information to each of the task force members by tomorrow. So you will have some additional information around compensation, but tonight's PowerPoint I will be sharing with you as well. So let me share. Here we go. Okay, where did I go? Okay. So we'll start with what the current landscape is here in the county for the Prince George's County School Board. So as you can see, the compensation for school board members is $18,000, and that's for every member except for the student board member. The student board member actually receives a $5,000 scholarship from that is paid out at the end of their term. So $18,000 for regular school board members, and that's both appointed and elected. There's no distinction made for either. And then the school board chair receives $19,000. And what you don't see listed, but again is implied in this, is that the vice chair only receives $18,000 as well. So the only person who receives a slight increase is the school board chair. And as far as expense reimbursement, so as part of the compensation and as part of the work of the school board members undertake a lot of different activities. They host events. They attend conferences, even the mileage that they incur, the mileage costs that they incur to go back and forth to various events and meetings, they are reimbursed for. State statute caps that reimbursement at $7,000. So again, it's a reimbursable account. So technically, school board members are supposed to incur those costs, pay those costs, and then submit the proper receipts and paperwork to reimburse. And that account is set aside for each individual board member, where they have that $7,000 available to them. And again, that is set in statute. And professional development opportunities, as I mentioned, doing the expense reimbursement, for the Prince George's County School Board, there are several conferences the school board members normally attend, and policy has been outlined that they are encouraged to attend the conferences that are hosted by the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, the National School Boards Association, the Council of Urban Boards of Education, and then normally one additional conference of the members choosing. Now, these particular professional development opportunities actually are not a part of the $7,000 currently in the school board. So for any travel to these 4 approved conferences, the monies for these conferences, for board members to attend these conferences, actually comes out of the Board of Education's general fund. So it does not, again, it is not taken away from the $7,000 that the school board members have for whatever other activities if they choose to go to other conferences and things of that sort. And this is a little different that you may see in some other districts and other counties, where if there's any travel that the school board members are taking, then normally they have to pay for those up front and then they get reimbursed. So as you can imagine, this may have an impact on school board membership, right? Because you're asking people to incur particularly travel costs, which can be expensive if you're talking about hotel, airline tickets and things of that sort, rental cars if one is required or needed. And so in thinking about, and so suggesting to this task force and thinking about as you move forward, kind of when you want to make sure that you have a very diverse board and what our board looks like, you have to think about also the costs that are incurred by board members as they do their job, and how board members are able to afford those various costs. So for a couple of areas, boards of education within the Washington, D.C. area, the one I have is Montgomery County. So you see their members make $25,000 a year, and their president is $29,000 a year. In Howard County is $15,000. Anne Arundel County is $8,000 for a member, $9,000 for the vice chair, and $10,000 for the chair. Fairfax County is $32,000 and their chair is $34,000. In Baltimore City, that NA not applicable, they are not reimbursed. They are not compensated for their service. What has happened over the years is there's been some level of debate and discussion around compensation for school board members. And a little bit later on, a couple of slides later, you'll see where Montgomery County has a very systemic way that they look at compensation for their school board members. But there's also been discussion around, there was discussion for Fairfax County a number of years ago about increasing their compensation as well. So it is an ongoing conversation that's not just happening here in Prince George's County, but it's happening across the country. So here you see the compensation for the 10 largest school districts that we have in the United States. So you'll see New York City Department of Education, again, the NA, they are not compensated. In Los Angeles, and this is pretty recent for them, they just experienced 173% increase in their salary, and they went up to $125,000 a year. Now, the caveat around that $125,000 is if the person actually receives compensation or a salary from another employer or they're employed somewhere else, then they actually are capped at 50,000. So this technically is for someone who is considered to be a full-time school board member. If they're serving kind of in a part-time capacity and they have another job elsewhere, then they would not be receiving 125. Again, the max for those people would be $50,000. In Chicago, they are not compensated. Miami-Dade, and actually you'll see, and I'm not going to go through, you'll see a number of Florida counties listed here. In 2018, actually, the state of Florida actually had in statute that their board members were compensated based on the population of their county. However, that was amended. That law was amended, and it actually was in 2018. So up to 2018, they were getting compensated according to the population of the county. In 2018, that law was amended to pretty much cap Florida school board members at a certain amount, and mainly, and this was interesting, to ensure that they were not paid more than what the starting salary was for a teacher in that district. And because you actually see that in some of the districts where, for example, you can imagine in Los Angeles, they're getting paid pretty much way above what some of the starting teachers would get paid in that district. I mean, excuse me, in that district. So in Houston, they're not compensated, and that's actually in state law that Texas school board members are not to be compensated for their service on the school board. And then you see Clark County, Nevada, and others. Charlotte, Mecklenburg, which a lot of times people compare to Prince George's County, their school district, I didn't include them on here because they don't necessarily fall in this list of 10 largest, but they are at $19,000 a year. And their chair or president is at $25,000 a year. So just if you're looking at a kind of comparable school district, again, Charlotte Mecklenburg is one that normally a lot of people compare Prince George's County to. And as I mentioned earlier, what's very interesting, and actually Los Angeles also had something very similar to this. So Montgomery County, they have a Montgomery County Board of Education Compensation Commission. So this was actually established in 2018. It was brought to the attention by one of the delegates, and the Montgomery County delegation actually put forth this proposal in 2018. As you can see, the proposal passed. And so the commission itself started meeting in the fall of 2019. As noted in the first bullet, the commission members are nominated by the county executive. So it's technically a county executive board and commission. But they're formally appointed by council. They had 15 meetings over that time period. And what the law requires them to do is study the compensation and salary of the school board members every 4 years and to report on that. And so they issued their first report in 2019. And one of the statements that was made kind of in the preamble executive summary of that report was that the proposal or the salary that they proposed, they felt was not reflective of the time and effort needed for a board member to fulfill their duties and responsibilities, nor the type of work that the board is called on to perform. And that really is the core of the conversation about the time and effort that it takes to be a school board member. Is it a part-time job? What are the hours? When you look at NSBA does a survey of school board members nationally, many school board members, I can't remember the percentage, I want to say definitely close to 50% talked about working way more than 40 hours a week on school board member duties. So again, if you just think about salary of for a full-time job, here in some cases, school boards are considered part-time positions. And then you see the salaries may reflect that. The report that this commission submitted proposed a $60,000 salary for school board members and $70,000 for president. But as you remember, as I told you earlier, what their pay is $25,029. As you can see, the recommendations of that commission were not taken at all. But what I felt was very interesting that I found in the report, and I think is very critical for this task force to really look at when they're thinking about compensation and shaping that conversation, is the factors that they looked at. And these factors were listed in law. Now, mind you, we don't have a law necessarily that tells us how do we determine compensation, but I think since this is part of the charge of this task force, to really think about these very factors to scope of responsibilities of a board member, education skills and abilities necessary to perform, the salaries of similar board members, which is kind of what we're talking about tonight in other jurisdictions, the time required, which we talked about. And then this was very interesting, the salaries of subordinate employees under the direct supervision of the board. And that could reflect a lot of the administrative support staff that most school boards have. So a lot of school boards have, they have administrative assistants or executive assistants. They have chiefs of staffs. They have various staff members who may report to them or who support them. And in many cases, that support staff is probably paid more than most of the school board members are paid. And so that may be why they decided to look at that particular element. And then the volume and workload of the board. So when, I felt like this, and actually the Los Angeles salary that we saw in the 125,000 was also proposed by a similar body. They're not called it wasn't a commission, or it was close to like a commission or a task force, but they are also tasked with looking at school board member salaries, in their case, every 5 years. And proposing if whether or not there should be an increase or not. So again, Montgomery County put this in place in 2018, Los Angeles, and proposing that $125,000. That's who they received that proposal from. One of the things that Montgomery County did as well as part of their process, which was very interesting, and again, it'll be part of some of the documents that are shared, they actually did a survey of the public to get some insight into what they thought school board members should get paid. And also just to even get insight into what they thought school board members did, how much did they work as far as the amount of hours, and they actually, and when you look at the report, and again, I can provide the full report to everyone from this commission, the report gives you every answer that was provided. And I think they had about close to 300 responses to the survey. And some of the answers are very interesting. People wouldn't know they should be compensated for anything. And then some people went as far as $100,000. But there was always some type of commentary attached to it. No, they should do it for the kids. Or someone's like, oh, they work really hard. If they're working full time, then they should be compensated as such. So I think you'll find some of that background information very helpful as well, as you kind of contemplate and think about what we would like to see in the county and Prince George's County. And I think that's kind of the really core of it and what we're seeing across the country and what we're seeing somewhat in our area. And again, in thinking about, we talked earlier during the task force meetings about the duties and responsibilities. So really weighing on that. And then also even just professional development, and kind of what we want to see from our school board members and how we want make sure that that's adhered to. Because as I noted before, the Prince George's County Board of Education, as far as the conferences, that's not in law. That's just something that the board came up as part of their kind of their policy, their bylaws, and their, as far as what they wanted to see. But there's nothing in law that says they have to attend those particular conferences. So on that note, Mr. Chair, Dr. Coleman, I'm completing my presentation and I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. And thank you for this very, very informative presentation, giving us not only what's happening here in our backyard, but what's happening with our neighbors and across the country in other ways, and giving us an anchoring point of what district we could be comparing ourselves to if we are looking at likeness. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions from there we go, Mr. Wallace.
Can I unmute? Yeah, I had one question. I thought it was interesting that several of the larger jurisdiction like in New York and Boston, they don't pay their board members at all. Could you explain the logic of that in lieu of all the other places looking at education, number of hours and all that? How do you justify saying we don't pay you at all in the larger?
I don't know if I could give a proper justification for it. What you do see in some of the districts, and what I noted is, like, for example, in Baltimore City, they don't compensate and all of their board members are appointed. I believe same thing with New York as well. I'm not sure about Chicago. I want to say that is the case as well. And so it may anchor on the fact of whether or not they're elected or appointed members. That's kind of what I've seen as far as some of the alignment, but that's not always the case. There are definitely a number of school districts that have all elected boards and their board members are not paid. So I don't want to just tie it to that. But that could be part of the possibility. I don't know, Ms. Jacobs, if you had any thoughts about that, but that's kind of what I was seeing as I was doing some of this research.
Well, there's about 15,000 school boards in the country, and the majority of them are not paid. So it's unusual to see school board members paid in the country. They may get reimbursed, as you said, for mileage or something like that. And some board members get a fee per meeting. So they might get like $15 for attending their board meetings. Like literally that's how that's the majority. That's what it looks like across the country. Most are not paid.
Yeah.
Ms. Jacobs, until we have another member ask a question, when you say majority, are you talking, I mean, do you have a percentage sense idea, ballpark? And I'm not trying to corner you into a given number, but when you say majority, it's like 51%, 60%, you know what I mean? It's like, how majority is majority?
Majority is probably closer to like 80%.
Wow.
School board members school board service is considered the most unpaid elected office, appointed or otherwise, but it's definitely uncommon for school board members to be compensated across the country. So I would say it's much more than 50%.
Yes.
And 80 might even be conservative.
Wow. Okay.
And I can share with you, Dr. Coleman, what was always interesting, whenever I attended the National School Boards Association conference and would have the opportunity to talk to board members from all across the country, there was always, kind of I don't want to say a resentment, but a jealousy there. They like, you guys get paid? It was always kind of a nice little talking point sometimes when you interact with other board members, because they were like, we don't get anything. And and I was like, yes, our school board members get paid. So.
Thank you. My Hollywood squares switched a little bit, but I think I saw Ms. PK go and then Ms. Sue, if you can go after.
Sorry, did you call on me?
I did.
Okay,
So.
awesome. Not to make you narrow in further on the sample of saying a majority, but I'm curious to know, like, when in terms of the larger school systems, because I know our school system is pretty large compared to the majority in the nation. So of that grouping, is it more common to see compensation?
So the ones that stand out the most, which you saw Erica presented, like Los Angeles and Miami, because they at one time, they were based on student population. The larger districts in California, like Los Angeles, but when you look at other larger, if you were to look at, for example, the Council of Great City Schools, which tends to have large urban districts, they are also not compensated. Most school boards, including urban, are not usually compensated. So you'll have a few that will get a few, like I'm trying to think of Charlotte. I don't even think that I heard that was one on there that you mentioned, Erica, but I'm not sure how long that's been. I've served with colleagues in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and they at one time were not getting paid, or at least at the same time that we were serving. So some of the larger school districts, they're still not getting paid.
Yeah, the Charlotte Mecklenburg figure that I gave was in 2020, I want to say 2020, because they were trying to get their pay increased. So and I don't know when that salary went into effect, but part of what I found was that at that time they were debating whether to get their pay increase. And just so you know as well, earlier this year in Florida, there was actually a proposal put before the voters to not pay Florida school board members. So there were some that put that forth as, that they wanted to put that a ballot initiative out there to remove the salaries for Florida school board members.
And of course, some of that was related to what's going on politically around mask wearing and things like that.
Yeah.
So there was a backstory to that one.
Mm-hmm.
But that was part of the reason for that being put forth.
Okay.
Hi, Ms. Rivera. And
Oh,
then Ms. Smith, I saw you.
Thank you. My question, and I suppose it can be for any school board, I'm curious about, they list roles and responsibilities and what school board members do, but what are they actually doing to earn this money, I guess? You can say, I'm a teacher and I'm expected to teach. Okay, and I get what a teacher does, but for the general public to understand day to day what a Board of Education member is doing, I'd be curious to see how the salary is justified, and then how in the non-paid, in that 20-ish% that Virginia offered, are they doing the same work? And is it about a budget priority? If just a little more expansion on these specifics will be helpful. Thank you.
So, Sue, what I would say is, at the end of the day, I think if you talk to individual school board members, as kind of was mentioned by I forgot her name, but our representative we had on duties and responsibilities, and Ms. Jacobson added as well, there is a significant amount of work that goes not just attending meetings, but if you think about the work that school board members, at least you hope, are putting into understanding issues, kind of making informed decisions when they come before. And again, this is based on my experience in working with the school board. There's a lot of information there to really understand and digest and analyze and things of that sort. And it doesn't take place in a 2-hour span at a school board meeting. But not only that, but what community members really are looking for is the level of community engagement and really being out there. And so they're the phone calls, they're the emails, they're the PTA, PTO, PTSA meetings. There's the events that school board members put in all the time. One of the districts that I looked at, the board member said, hey, well, look at the commissioners. And in this case, the commissioner was equivalent to a council member. And they felt like, hey, what is the commissioners getting paid? We should at least get paid similar because we work just as hard. We're doing just as much as far as that. So, I think if you talk to school board members, those who are really doing the job and what it takes to really do the job, it can be quite daunting and a lot. I wasn't a school board member, but just just witnessing and seeing, and I see Ms. Jacobs has come off and mute, it definitely could be a lot.
When I ran for the school board, I ran at large, so I had to cover the entire county. I was told there was 2 meetings a month, second and fourth Thursday. I worked 23 years in corrections. I used more leave on my job for the school board than I did in my entire career. And that involved, there was 2 board meetings a month, but then you had committee meetings. And you had constituents that you needed to meet with no office, by the way. So you're usually meeting with them in the parking lot or in a restaurant somewhere. Thankfully, and some school boards don't have staff. We had a sort of a collective of staff that would support you. So one staff person might support 3 or 4 board members to help you navigate your scheduling. But overall, if you're gonna put the work in, if you're not going to change the roles and responsibilities, and you're going to actually do the work that's necessary to be effective as a school board member, it takes a lot of time. And most people know I worked in corrections, and I literally would leave the jail and come to the board office, change my uniform so that I was able to get on camera for a board meeting. Like that's how how in-depth it was. And that's not to say that everybody has the same level, but I mean, I was chair for almost 6 years too, so that was even more work. But school board members are really putting in a lot of time. And now I think they're probably, the engagement is a little bit more because the public has, as I said earlier, kind of woke up and said, wait a minute, school board members really have a lot that they're making decisions on. So it's one of those things where, you know, when you go into it, you know you're not being paid. But at the same time, you may not necessarily know how much time you're really putting in.
Thank you, both of you. Ms. Smith, you had a question or comment.
All right, getting myself off mute. Thank you for the presentation, Erica. That was wonderful. My question to you on the you mentioned about the survey that Montgomery County did. Has Prince George's County done a similar survey in which we have defined those 6 scopes that you mentioned? Oh, okay, so the answer is no. And if so, would that be possible to do, or would that be something like a recommendation from this group to put forward?
So I know I was nodding, but I don't want to be rude. No, no survey has been done in Prince George's County along those lines. And if you recall, what I did say is that it was the commission who did the survey. So again, you had a particular body that was tasked to try to find those answers. I think, you know, it's worth, and again, I will share the survey and the survey results with this group. Is worth looking at to see whether or not that's something that you feel like, you know, that's something you want to recommend. Again, I think it's when, you know, we go back to the beginning when Ms. Jacobs actually talked about educating the public, it actually could possibly, you know, also give some insight into what the public really knows. I don't even know if they really know school board members get paid. You know, or it'll be interesting to see how much time they do think school board members spend and what they do and what their roles and responsibilities are. Because as I stated, some of the responses to that survey just show just how much some people just didn't understand or realize. So I think it actually can serve in an educational capacity as well in educating the public what the school board is really about.
Thank you so much. I agree with you as well. And definitely finding out the do's and don'ts of what people really think.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mr. Gresham, you had a question or comment?
Yes. I wanted to ask a question concerning possibly 2 different things, and I'm not sure they're somewhat related. One is, I agree with the fact that I think that no question that they should be paid, no question, because upon last week's discussion, it was told to us that $70,000 was spent on running for an $18,000 position. So that's interesting. There's a disparaging difference between that. And I think that that is to be noted. But second to that, what I'm also somewhat interested in is the student board member. Now, I'm not sure, and the first question I really want to ask to get some knowledge, because of course, I will claim to be a neophyte. Talking about Prince George's County, is it unique to have a student board member a part of the board? That's what I want to know, first of all.
Okay. No, it's not a unique, that's not unique. You see that across boards. I can't tell you, I couldn't give you a percentage.
Okay.
But there are a number, especially in some of and actually I won't even say that based on the size. My experience is that I've seen a lot of boards have student board members. That's not unique at all.
Now, what I'm somewhat shocked at and a little surprised at is the amount that we're giving towards scholarships. Now, given the current status of school cost or college cost or however you want to put it, $5,000 is a drop in the bucket,
right?
Especially for someone of the school boards, because we're not talking about an average student. We're talking about someone who is aspiring to be or to go to probably a very good school. And if they're going to a private institution, that $5,000 can be eaten up so fast. And I think, well, and I guess I'm not on the compensation subcommittee, so I don't know if I should make any comments concerning that. But I think it is something that I think we need to really take a look at. So those two things are somewhat related, but I don't want to extenuate the conversation because I know my time is limited. So go right ahead.
No, I appreciate that, Pastor Gresham. And even though you're not on the subcommittee, obviously we're still, we want to talk to and hear from all of our committee task force members about their thoughts around these issues. And I know Ms. Smith and other subcommittee members, will take note of what we're hearing today. But I think that's a very legitimate observation and thought. Yet I can't tell you how long that $5,000 has been in place, but it's been a while. And so, yeah, there may be some room to look at that and reconsider how much, and particularly, like you said, based on the increase in attending college.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Pastor Gresham. Ms. PK, you had another question, comment.
Yes, it's just a comment to follow up on Pastor Gresham's comment on scholarships for student school board members. Just adding knowledge from my job. I know there's quite a few bills in Annapolis going to be introduced this year on student board members' scholarship amounts. So I know that's something statewide that is of concern to a lot of folks. So just putting that into the room.
Thank you for that, PK.
Hey, Mr. Wallace, do you have another hand up?
You're
on mute,
muted,
sir.
Mr. Wallace.
Yeah, the question is, and you may not know the answer, how does the workload of the council compare with the workload of a school board member? And how does the compensation for the councilman compare with the compensation for a school board member?
So I can't speak for a council member. I'm not very familiar with their work. If I remember correctly, their compensation was it on the ballot? I thought it was on the ballot maybe a couple of years ago. At least they were and John, correct me if I'm wrong, or at least whether or not they were going to be considered full-time versus part-time. I think I do remember that issue. I mean, PK, I see you nodding your head because your intergovernmental affairs people may be more familiar with this, but and then I think their compensation is around 120 or so. Is that about right? So they get paid about $120,000, and I think now they're considered full-time employees, but I can't speak to what their workload is and whether or not they work more or less than school board members. I don't know if anyone on this call can necessarily on this meeting can necessarily speak personally from that. So
I think on the compensation piece, just to weigh in on that, I think they've been considered full-time for quite a while now. And just in looking back over my time with the county, and remembering a time that their salary was, slightly lower than what it is now, but still, maybe just shy of $100,000. I want to say somewhere around $98,000 or so. And then a little bit of a bump when you were the chair or the vice chair. But I think even at that time, they had become considered full-time. And that was back in the somewhere in the 2005, 2007 range. So I can't speak to my time before the county, but they've been considered full-time,
okay.
For a number of years at this point on the council.
Okay, I stand corrected. Thank you, John.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments right now from our esteemed members? Hey, Ms. Smith.
Thank you. I had just two different questions. One, Erica, you mentioned the conferences, and the conferences, are they mandatory for the board members?
They're not mandatory. As I stated, they're strongly encouraged to attend those. I mean, and for the most part, you don't find most board members who are refusing to go because they actually do have a lot of helpful sessions, work sessions and topics and things of that sort. And it always is very helpful sometimes, I think, for board members to meet other board members from particularly similarly situated districts and talking about best practices and things of that sort. One of the things that I think is critical though, and Ms. Jacobs will remember this, is that when they do attend conferences, to kind of really make sure that one, that there's information being brought back and that board members are really partaking in what the conference has to offer. And so whether that's, a conference report that has to be submitted, or something along those lines. And I always thank Ms. Jacobs because she actually used to do her report. And not all board members did their reports. But it's always helpful because, again, if you're hearing something, I remember hearing things at various conferences and I thought, oh, this may work in Prince George's. This may be something we should consider. That's something that we would want our board members to do. So it should be a very strongly, encouraged activity for board members to attend these various conferences.
Wonderful.
But it's
Thank
not
you.
required. It's not
required. Okay. Along that same line in terms of expenses, so let's say when board members are not paid, do we know if board members still get reimbursement for other things that they have to do or activities, or does a board member that does not get paid does not get any help to do what they have to do? It's just all of it. It's all or nothing.
Yeah, so I can't speak because as Ms. Jacobs mentioned, there's so many boards that don't get paid, and to really look and see whether or not they get reimbursed for any cost incurred in doing their job. I can't really speak to that, honestly and knowledgeably. I do know in some of the kind of the regional ones where I looked and saw that they're not paid, they do get reimbursed again, because there are some costs that are incurred, but I can't speak for, say, maybe some of the smaller districts where they don't get paid and whether or not they get paid for mileage and things of that. So we would hope so, right? That they would at least get something, to help, soften the blow to their pockets. But again, I can't say for sure. And I don't want to say, yeah, they definitely do, when I can't say for sure.
No problem. And my last question is, when you mentioned compensation according to the population of the county, is there like a formula to determine that compensation? And if so, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So I don't know the specific formula. I just know that Florida used to have that in law. And then after 2018, they changed it. I'm happy to, and again, as part of maybe the subcommittee's work or even providing that information to the task force, I'm happy to go back and see what the law was pre-2018 and how that formula was developed, and provide that information to you all.
Thank you. Ms. Lavera, you had another question or comment?
Actually, I'm just going to add some information I Googled to find out what the county council's salary is. And it's about 120,000 and some other, a little more than 120,000. The whole thing about raising that had to do with the $10,000 they were given as an option to supplement their car expenses, that sort of thing. And it also, the same article says that lawmakers in Montgomery County made just shy of 129,000, and in the district 137,500. So you can see there's some comparable things, but it's curious as we review what our board members are being paid and what the work, it's more about the work and that kind of thing.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the same article, and then just as it was the case with the school board, you find some way up here and then some down here. So like we were making 120, paying our county 120. If you look at Baltimore City, they are paying 68,000 to county, to the council. And then Baltimore County is paying 62,000. So you get a 50% bump from Baltimore County up to Prince George's County. So you get the same spread in salaries for county council people as you do in school boards as you go around the nation, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any additional comments or questions for Ms. Wilson or Ms. Jacobs even. While I give you some wait time, I have a couple questions of myself. So with regard to Charlotte Mecklenburg, is that the location that is similar to Prince George's County?
Yeah, I mean, the people look at the kind of the racial and ethnic makeup, the size and things, and it's kind of a, if you want to call it, an urban suburb, right? So that's why, yes.
Thank you. Do we have a sense, an idea, or ear on the ground as to where they are looking at moving their salary toward?
If I recall, it was they were trying to go from 19,000 to 25 for members. I think 25 to 32 for the president, but I can look that up very quickly. And if you have another question, you can fire that away.
Okay, thank you. I do have an unrelated question.
Okay.
Ms. Smith asked one of my questions, thankfully, and that's to the extent that the PD conferences are required, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or are they elective, but yet these are the ones that are on the list and they get to select another. We heard a few weeks ago that it's a good idea for the CEO/superintendent and the BOE to maybe do PD together. And I was wondering, to an extent currently, is there some collaboration or co-construction around PD together with our current CEO, Dr. Golson, and our Board of Education? Do they do any PD together? Do they travel to these conferences together at all, to the extent that we know?
Normally, I mean, I haven't, I haven't been part of the school board since Dr. Golson's been the CEO, but normally the conferences that the school board members attend, particularly National School Boards Association meeting and even the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, normally the school board members attend as well as the CEOs and superintendents. And a lot of times there may be tracks for the superintendent and CEOs to kind of follow that may not necessarily align with the school board members, but a lot of times they are there at the same time, they just may be at different tracks.
Yes.
But that's not to say, and then a lot of times too, the way that the sessions are designed, they're designed to kind of speak to a particular target audience. So whether it's a board member or a superintendent. So you might not necessarily find them in the room at the same time. I do recall that NSBA, I know they used to love, and I think I attended one of my first sessions was board and superintendent relations. I think that's one of their favorite sessions, to really try to show best practices in board member and superintendent relations. So you may find them in the room at that time to talk about that issue.
Thank you.
And can I just add, there's a known, it's a thing that superintendents don't like their board members going to conferences without them. So superintendents often attend the conferences with them. Board members don't necessarily attend the quote superintendent's conference, but most of the time they do come with the board members. And there's, to Erica's point, there's a superintendent track depending on which conference it is. There's a lot more engagement at like CUBE, which is the urban conference. That's one of the most popular, and you find superintendents that come without their boards when the boards don't come. So it just depends on the conference and what they're doing.
Now, I'm going to ask what might be a rhetorical question. Is there some type of debrief after these conferences, some type of learning community after these conferences, or maybe at the conference, but just with Prince George's County Board of Education and CEO?
No. I mean, I hate to keep it that simple, but
no, I appreciate the simplicity. Thank you.
No, I mean, maybe if some board members get together at lunch, it was like, oh yeah, I went to this session and they were talking about, A, B, C, and D, but no formal debrief. No. And that's what I was talking about, at least having board members either report out or issue some type of report or written report so that information can be shared with their colleagues, once they get back.
Yes.
Because again, these conferences are pretty big and everybody can't attend all the sessions. And so, it's always great if even board members can strategize like, okay, I'll cover this, you'll cover that. But I don't recall that happening too much, at least from my experience.
No, I put it out there as, possibly rhetorical, as, maybe something to look into, strongly encourage, suggest, or for the BOE to, look for, to pass as far as one of their policies, that there is some type of debrief report out that becomes required.
Yeah.
On some level, especially if we strongly suggest or in our recommendation that certain professional development is required.
Right. And just to go back to your first question, so they were looking to go to 27,000 for board members. And this is Charlotte Mecklenburg.
Yes.
$27,000 for board members, and the board chair would receive 32,000. And they're right now at 19 and 25.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I think I gave enough wait time. Anyone else have any questions? Pastor Gresham, please.
I don't know if it strikes me odd or strikes anyone else odd, but given the case, and I want to ask Ms. Jacobs this, because obviously she was on the school board while working a full-time job with the prison, and she in corrections. How did you manage attending conferences of that magnitude, given the limited amount of leave? And I know you did speak on the amount of leave that you took off concerning this. How did you manage the two things? Because it seems like it's almost an impossible situation.
So I'll start by saying I've kind of always been a workaholic. So, and I'm not saying that's a good thing. The one thing that I tell school board members now is that do a better job than I did taking care of yourself. I literally just worked. I took leave. And if you think about someone who may not have that option, it makes it more difficult for them to serve. But I had, I was able to take leave from my job to attend a conference. But also, to be clear, I wasn't able to always attend all of them either. So, we kind of pick and choose which ones you can actually go to, what time of the year. Sometimes the NSBA conference was during spring break. So it was better for the school district, and it was easier for me to take off at work. I would just say it, and you just can't take it lightly. When I say I was leaving the jail to come to the board office, thank goodness it was less than 5 miles away, that you could get there. And then in 2011, I had my son, which, if you're a parent and you're also doing that, it was even more difficult. So, I would just say, how do you do it? It was hard. It was very tough to do. And then in campaign seasons, it was even worse. So, but at the end of the day, I think what you ended up doing, it was service. It was something that I was passionate about. And most people know that's why I'm doing it nationally, because I care about it. So it comes down to that, but you still have to be intentional about caring for yourself and your family. And I didn't do a really good job at that. I often didn't do enough to take care of myself. So I don't recommend that at all. I just think that people need to I think one thing that happens is you have to be honest about what that service is. It's more than two nights a month. And let people know, like some MABE does sessions across the state when the counties wanted to say, so you want to be a school board member, this is what's required, this is what happens as a school board member, so that people have a better sense of their service. And also the final thing I would say is that you have to ask a question. Do you want people to just wake up one day and say, I have nothing else to do, so let me run for the school board? Is that what you really want? Because oftentimes also I served with people who didn't have full-time jobs. So that was all they did, but you have to ask the question, is that what you're looking for? And I'm not saying that's a problem. I'm just saying that's part of the question when you talk about this service. It's okay.
And Pastor Gresham, I'm sorry. And Pastor Gresham, I'm sorry. I just wanted to correct something I stated earlier, and thank you, Ms. Jacobs, for the nudge. It's actually $5,000 a year for the student board member, so it's actually a total of $20,000. I knew 5,000 was in my head, but I'm sorry, it was a year. So what happens is they're provided that scholarship for 4 years for $5,000 each year.
Okay, understand. And interestingly enough, so that means if they're a freshman, they're going to get 20,000, right?
Right. And
But if
they're
they
also,
started-
these are high school students, so it's always
Right.
going to be 20,000. Yes, it's always
But
going to be
that
20,000.
means everybody starts as a freshman? It doesn't necessarily mean that the person couldn't start in their junior year?
Wait,
So they can start
mean,
at
I guess I'm a little
14.
confused.
So Jess,
I'm
Yeah, I was
saying,
trying
no.
to figure out what he was asking. Yeah.
Okay, well, you're saying that the school board member of the school board, or the student member of the school board
Mhm.
gets the possibility of 20,000 because they can start in the 9th grade, which means, you follow what I'm saying?
Oh,
But
so
if-
no, so student school board members, one, you're not eligible to be a student school board member until your junior year of high school.
Okay, so that means
So-
they're only for 2 years?
So they can actually be the student school board member their junior year, and they could be the student school board member their senior year if they say get elected 2 terms in a row. And in that case, they would get $40,000 because they would get 20,000 for serving that 1 year as in the junior year and $20,000 again for their senior year. So the money, you see what I'm saying? So it's $20,000 total for your 1 year term as a student board member.
Oh, okay, so
Okay.
the $5,000 I was thrown off.
Yeah,
The
I'm sorry. And like I said, I
$5,000
may have been, I may have kind of made it a little confusing. So, but what happens is the payout for the student board member service is $5,000 for each year of college.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I got you. The payout is for intentionally towards the college, not necessarily time served on the council,
Right, exactly,
on the board. Okay, I got you.
exactly,
Understand.
yes.
So they don't get the entire $20,000 to put into their first year of college. It gets
No.
dispersed across each year.
Yes.
Got you. It's a good question, Pastor Gresham. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Wilson, for circling back with us and making sure we're on the right track.
Yep.
Mr. Wallace, you had another question.
Yes, one other question. Because of the salary, it does not appear that one would run to the school board to make money. I mean that isn't right. But the other motivation might be in some jurisdiction that serving on the school board is a stepping stone to getting on the council or higher office. In your experience, has that been the case that yes, some people join the board and their real motivation is to run for higher office, and this is kind of the entry point?
It's very hard, and I'll let Ms. Jacobs, for me, it's very hard to say what anybody's motivation is, right? Their motivation is what they tell the voters their motivation is. They want to help the children of Prince George's County. They want to improve our school system. Now, if people have hidden agendas or secret agendas, who knows? One thing I was a mind reader, so I couldn't tell you what their motivation was. I mean, have we seen school board members who have then left and pursued other, political offices? Yes, we have. I can say that. But did they get on the school board in the hopes that that would help launch their political career? I can't really speak to that. So I know Ms. Jacobs, you had unmuted. You wanted to say something.
So we did 2 studies. There was a 2010 study and a 2018 study that asked the question about school board service tenure. And so there has been the notion that school board members run for, that people run for school board with hopes of higher office. And while that does exist, we have congresspersons who were at some point a school board member, and we have people in our own state who are currently council or state legislators who were school board members. But across the country, the data shows that that's not the case. That school board members, the average, the 2010 study had the average school board member serving 10 years. And the 2018 study was, the average service was 8 years. But what we found was that people were serving, there are school board members currently across the country who are 40 years, 30 years. And that's not so unusual, particularly in rural districts. So the research shows that, and the data shows that school board members tend to run for office and stay in those seats, sometimes for way too long, like maybe myself. And then it also suggests that when they're done, they just retire. Not to say they're not, like some aren't going to other office, but that's not the norm.
Thank you for your questions and your responses. I think we've had enough wait time to see if anyone else had more questions and raise their hand if so, but I'm going to give one more round of quick silence to see if there are any more questions. And for the sake of time, I want to see if Ms. Wilson or Ms. Jacobs have any closing remarks before we move on to a couple of decisions that we have to make as a task force.
Well, thank you, Dr. Coleman. Just wanted to close this out. Again, thanking everyone for the insightful questions and thoughts. I will again share the PowerPoint, and also there's some additional information I will be sharing with the group as well. Again, I think it is this is part of the critical decision that has to be made as far as recommendations for compensation, and really looking at it holistically. And not kind of just thinking about, okay, what do they do and how much should they get paid for what they do, but also in thinking about how does salary work as far as attracting a diverse school board, because we really want to make sure that our school board represents the people of this county and reflects the people of this county. And so one of the arguments, just really quickly, that a lot of people make is when you don't pay your school board members, do you then run the chances of creating an elitist school board? Because you then have people who can afford to quote unquote work for nothing. And we're talking about a significant amount of work. So again, just some thoughts to have. And I know that Ms. Smith and other subcommittee members will, in the compensation, will look into those matters. And as far as professional development, I think that is a very critical point, because I think that was something that was very important to me, and just thinking about how school board members are staying in front of what's going on in our education world. So just something to think about. And again, I thank you guys for your attention this evening.
Thank you for your research and for your already current knowledge, Ms. Wilson. And Ms. Jacobs, did you want to add anything as we thank you as well?
I would just add that when you think about professional development, oftentimes, if citizens aren't aware of what's going on, they tend to see board members getting professional development as junkets. And so when it's mandated, it provides the opportunity for school board members to get the professional development they need. What's often said is we require all the administrators and teachers to get professional development, and then school board members go without getting any supports at all. And so it's important, I think, when we often a lot of school board members, it's 90,000 in the country, do not go to the annual conference. They often won't go because it's politically not expedient for them. Although there are some states that mandate training and professional development. Just think about when you, in those recommendations, it's important so that citizens understand why board members need that, because oftentimes that's where they get best practices and really learn things that they can bring back to the district that's supportive for students.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. And similar to Ms. Wilson, of course, we appreciate your expertise and the research that you supported to come today. We have a couple of matters to address, and I think that they work in tandem. One is that we are going to request an extension of our work. We are still in the information gathering phase. And because we're here, we're very hesitant to shoot from the hip, if you will, colloquially speaking, to come up with a recommendation before we've gathered enough information and have come together enough. So we're proposing an approximate 1-month extension. And we're going to send this to you via email with some support from, I'm going to call it John and his crew, which may be a singing group one day. We're proposing an approximate 1-month extension to, at the very latest, provide our recommendation by February 18th. at the very latest. But let me back us into what that schedule looks like. We'll get some information about what next week looks like, because we'll come here back on Tuesday, and then we will work within our subcommittees through the first week of January, and then come back as a whole group Wednesday, January 12th. Let me check my notes. Wednesday, January 12th. Then we will spend, and then on Wednesday, January 12th, here we'll start fielding our recommendations thus far. Where are we so far? And then we'll start reporting out, answering our own questions, asking our own questions among the entire task force. Then that will be a benchmark point to see where else do we need to go as far as information gathering and decision-making. And then we'll spend another couple of weeks within our subcommittees, and then come back on as a whole group, come back around February 2nd. February 2nd. And then as I move my calendar, there we want to start wrapping up our recommendations as best possible. If possible, we would like to solidify, concretize our recommendations during that week of February 2nd or Wednesday, February 9th. And if we can be done there, that'd be great. But we're giving ourselves to the 18th as a buffer. That's an important decision that I'll be asked to write a letter requesting for that an approximate month extension. But that's important, and it runs tandem to the possibility of another open forum, another listening session, right? And the reason why that's in tandem is because if we have another listening session, another open forum, the recommendation for that date would be January 19th, a day that we're not scheduled to meet as a whole group. But that's not a decision that I'm making, nor a decision that staff is making. It's something that we should put to a vote and discussion. So I'm putting it out there now. What do you feel about, or how do you feel about another open forum? And it's not a vote. I sort of want to hear your voices. I want to hear, what are your thoughts around it? Yay or nay or indifferent, whatever that is. Ms. Rivera.
I am totally in favor of having another public forum for transparency. I mean, people can see what we're doing here, but they don't know what we're talking about in our subgroups. I think that if we can provide some summary thoughts, that before we put it in ink, as it were, you know, when we're in pencil, but before ink, is to just throw it out there. Also to give the illicit perspective from our community. So they have some input into this. And then it still gives us in our subgroups time to incorporate perhaps new thinking or a revision of our thinking. So again, for transparency, given the state of the world these days, I think this is particularly important that they know that this task force is listening, not just working as our little group. So I'm in total favor.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. And Mr. Erzin, you're going to clean me up and or add some context.
No, I just wanted to add one piece of context as you guys are talking about the whether or not you want to do a second public listening session. The one thing, I know we did not have a great turnout in terms of the overall number of people who came to speak. So one of the things to just keep in mind that we'd be doing if you guys do decide to do a second public listening session is after we create the invitation, not only would we send it out through the Office of the County Executive and through all the same channels that we did last time, we would make sure that all of you have a copy of that invitation, and we would ask that you all send it out to email lists and groups that you are affiliated with, you know, to help make sure that we are, I think we go very wide with our outreach, but to help us go even more targeted with our outreach to make sure that we're reaching into all of the various communities and groups that are represented by the members of the task force, and you know, into the areas where, you know, there is probably very specific interest in the work that this group is doing. So I just wanted to put that out there for a context piece as you all are having your discussion.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Erzin. Ms. Smith, you had a comment, question? You have the
Yeah,
floor.
comment and question and slash suggestion. I too agree with Sue with regards with transparency, with regards with hearing from the public. As you were aware, I asked the question regarding the survey. I'm always very much interested in the view of the public as a whole. And so I even would like to think about proposing the switch instead of, you mentioned that the 19th was not a proposed, was not a date that we were in session. It was an additional date. I would propose switching the two, where on January 12th, we're hearing the public, and then on the 19th, we're synthesizing, so that we can get more from the public as we begin to funnel down and really synthesize those recommendations. I kind of don't want to work backwards. I kind of want to work forward in terms of hearing everything and then putting something on paper, instead of being at the end of the project and then kind of filling it in as at the end. Just a proposal, just an idea I want to throw out there. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Let me add some more context to why the 19th, and I don't think I did a great job in doing so when I presented it. The 12th, we will be providing some conversation around some potential recommendations as far as we've gotten thus far. And so at that point, the public will be able to hear what we're thinking, what we're seeing, what we're thinking about thus far, wherever we are. It could be compensation, it could be roles, responsibilities, it could be something else. And so from there, the 19th, the public will have more information around the direction that we're moving toward to be able to further comment. We may get comments from folks that we've already had comments from, even because now they're seeing what kind of direction we're going into. And so that's sort of why the 19th was selected after the 12th, after the public has started to see the direction that we're moving toward.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that clarity.
Sure.
So,
I'm not saying let's take that. I'm not saying let's take your suggestion off the table. I'm just providing
Right.
more context of why the 19th was selected as a potential day.
I just wasn't aware that we were going to have a public hearing and share our recommendations. That threw me off guard. I thought that we were not, pardon me, I didn't know the steps there. So on the 19th, we are presenting what we have to the public and we are hearing the public. Yeah?
No, ma'am. So on the 12th, we are not necessarily sharing definitive recommendations. We'll be sharing where are we right now as far as recommendation making. Then they may not be solidified, but it is an insight, a snapshot of some of the thinking right now, and the right now will be by January 12th. So those potential recommendations would be information to the public, and then they get to respond to something that they haven't responded before, and or to whatever they might have heard on the 12th. And so we get to hear from the public what their response is based on our potential. And I'm underlying potential because they wouldn't be solidified necessarily, right? Around our potential recommendations thus far. And then hear on the 12th, their reaction to those potential recommendations, as well as whatever they're thinking, whatever else is on their heart.
Thank you.
So not both in the same night. The 12th is we have our regular meeting like we're having now. And then the 19th would be us listening to the public.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, actually. I appreciate this conversation. I'm asking for the conversation to hear your perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else want to share their perspective around another public forum or not? Or something else around public forum? So then let's put it to a vote. If I don't hear in any other discussion. Doing a vote virtually is fun. So if you vote yes for another public hearing, a second forum on January 19th, let's say, raise your hand, say aye, or put it in the chat.
Wow.
Let's get some numbers. Thank you. I see aye in the chat. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. My oracles, do you see anything less or more than 10?
It looks like,
I don't know
looks
if
like
you
you've got,
counted Courtney. I saw that she put I in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, so I think you have, Dr. Coleman, it looks like you have every member who is present tonight who has voted for a second public listening session.
And I'm going to stand down to if there was a split. So we're going to go with a unanimous vote for a second public forum on January 19th. Any further comments or questions around the extension, the second public forum, or anything else that we've talked about this evening?
The one thing that I'll say real quick, just from a logistics standpoint, we will get to work on that invitation to see. I think we can, probably done so we can put it in your hands before the Christmas. Certainly, at that point, feel free to share it as often as you'd like. We will certainly start to promote it. Now, the one thing that we will need to do, and I'll make sure that this coordinates. So Dr. Coleman, as the group has agreed to the extension request, we'll need to receive that letter from you. And I'd like to receive that letter before we begin promoting the listening session, because that listening session would actually be at a date that is currently beyond the time of the task force. So once I have that letter, I can move that forward so we can update the executive order that established the task force. And as soon as we have that done, then we should be able to push out the invitation for the listening session. We'll get that link set up, and we'll then have that ready to go. And we'll certainly have a regular schedule on our end where we push it out as well, leading up to the 19th. And we'll do it just as we did this one. We will leave the one from, I guess, last week. We will leave the registration open until 5 p.m. the day before, so 5 p.m. on the 18th. Everyone will be able to sign up until that time. That'll give us enough time to make sure we have our list of speakers and are ready to go for the following evening.
Thank you, Mr. Erzin. We'll get that letter to you this week. Absolutely. If not by tomorrow, really. Mr. Erzin, I think my work is done here for the night as far as leading the facilitation on our end. Oh, Ms. PK, you had a question. Sorry. My work is almost done.
Yes, sorry, just on the announcement of the open link for folks to sign up to register, just asking if it could possibly be shared on all the county's social media accounts. I know folks had issues finding the link, so I know that would be much appreciated for the public.
Absolutely, and typically the way we do that, just so this group is aware, and PK, thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's a good point. So this group is aware of how we typically do that. So in addition to sharing it on the county executives, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, newsletter that we have, our communications team multiple times a week sends out communications updates to the public information officers at all of our county agencies. And the reason we do that is because then they share that same information on all of the social media pages that they have as an agency. So we will make sure that the The flyer invitation for this event is in those communities, so that as we are sharing it, they are getting it to share as well. Everybody, I mean, certainly as the people you send it out to will go directly to them, but anyone who you want to point somewhere, the county executive's Facebook page, the county executive's Twitter, and the county executive's Instagram, or it can always be found there. And the handle for all of those is the same. So it's very easy. It's at CEX also Brooks. So they can be on any of those 3 platforms, do a search for that, and it will bring up our official office pages.
Before we close out, Ms. Jacobs, did you have any final thoughts, comments, or questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, Erica, are we, so for next week, I know Dr. Coleman mentioned, and we'll get this out, what we'd like to do, so we can have one more meeting prior to the holidays, because I do believe we were able to line up the guests that we'd like to have for that. Is we'd like to do that meeting on Tuesday, the 21st at 6:30 with a special guest presenter. And I know Erica was working on that. I want to make sure we're confirmed.
So I think we are, the presenter just had to check one more thing, and then they were going to get back to me tomorrow.
Okay, so as soon as we confirm that, we will announce that to the group, and for the members of the public who are watching, as we do with all the invitations for these meetings. When we send that out, we will announce on that invitation who the presenter is. We just want to go ahead and get that locked in to make sure that we have that before we announce that publicly. So as the invitation comes out for next week's meeting, see that, and certainly to the members of the task force, as soon as we have that locked in, that will be part of the email information that we send you as a follow-up to this meeting. So if there are no other questions or comments, I want to thank everybody. Again, I enjoyed being back tonight after having missed the last couple of meetings, and I think this was a very good discussion. I want to continue to thank you all for the work that you're doing, and for the time and the energy that you're putting in. I know that we all have very busy schedules, so as we add more things to our night, it makes it longer days. So certainly, on behalf of the county executive and our administration, just want to continue to thank you for the time that you're putting in here. And we look forward to the continued discussions, and certainly look forward as we get into the new year with the recommendations that you will all put forth for consideration. So with that, yes,
John, I just wanted to make a comment. When are we receiving the gift? Is that going to come before Christmas or after? Just thought
I'm sorry.
The gift, our gift, are we getting it before Christmas or after?
So we'll make sure, and thank you for that comment. Thank you for that. We'll make sure that we get that out. Everyone will be on the county executive's Christmas card list. So we'll certainly make sure that everyone has that,
Okay.
and prior to the holidays.
Great, okay. Thank you. Good holiday for everyone. All right.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you, everyone, and we'll see you next Tuesday and have that information to you very soon.
Okay. Good night.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Hmm.